Hello there, World of Tankers. Welcome to the channel. Hopefully all of you are doing well out there. I'm, of course, your host, Blitz, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about a specific class of tank destroyers in World of Tanks Blitz, which would be glass cannons. Now, in my opinion, tank destroyers are by far the most diverse class in the game. You've got vehicles like the T-30, which are fully traversable turreted tank destroyers. Then you move on to vehicles like the 4005, which do have a turret, but as well a clip, and a very large clip. You've got vehicles like the 183, Big Alpha, slow, the Foch, fast, big armor. There's so many different types of tank destroyers in the game, and almost every single tank destroyer line you go for has got a different type of vehicle. But in today's video, we are going to be specifically talking about the most fragile of them all, glass cannons. Now, I was starting to think about why glass cannons, in my opinion, are the most useless type of tank destroyers in the game and vehicles in the current meta of Blitz. And after I started thinking about it, it really does make a sense when you not only take a look at the average statistics of very lightly armored tank destroyers, but as well the average win rate from those players using them. Now, the 4005 is a very good tank, don't get me wrong. The 4005 and the Grill 15 can be extremely influential vehicles. If you play them correctly on a map, let's say like Deadrill here, you're going to see that this first game was a good example of how strong a vehicle like the 4005 can be if you use that clip correctly. And well, these shells here just did not want to hit. For some reason, the 4005 is either extremely accurate or decides to miss all of its shells. But the 4005 boasts an extremely good clip. 1,360 average damage, I think it is, with all three shells combined. That's enough to wipe off even half of a vehicle like a Mouse's hit points if you just roll high on a couple of your shells. It's such a deadly tank. But on the contrary, it can be very, very bad when you're running this tank because, of course, let's say I'm shooting and I get detected. Well, I don't know I'm detected until 3 seconds has happened. And a vehicle like the 4005 and the Grill 15 at tier 10 have literally no armor. The Grill's turret is about 15 millimeters on the front, which is terrible. And the same for the 4005 is 14 millimeters. Now, what that means is that high explosive rips this thing to pieces. Now, thankfully, the 4005 carries a special equipment called, I think it's Spall Liner. And pretty much what Spall Liner does is it makes it so that any HE shells gets 20% less damage if they do penetrate your vehicle, or not even if they penetrate, I think it's just 20% less. And as you can see there, thankfully, I got hit for 441, but it didn't roll the average of probably 500 to 600 damage, because that would have ripped me to shreds. And a good example is like the Grill here. It's easily going to get shot when people are aiming at it. It's got a very poor camouflage rating, same for the 4005. And this is where my issue of glass cannons occur. When you are on certain maps, let's say like Canyon, or let's say like Naval Frontier, where you really can't push up to support your team. The issue with a vehicle like this is that as soon as you get spotted, of course, all of the enemy's attention is going to come towards you because you are an easy target, and you've also got a really deadly gun. It's a good example of the FE 5B183. I kind of classify that as a glass cannon. It has literally no armor, very easily detected, but it carries an excellent gun able to rip into enemy hit points. And people target that thing for days because it's got such a deadly gun. Well, the 4005, as you're going to see here, has got just as deadly of a gun. We shot the WT once, we took off 550. We shot him twice, 476, and I'm going to fire one more standard here. We pretty much finished off the entirety of a full health tank destroyer. And that shows you how strong a vehicle like this can be played. But this is an exception because this is a map where you can carry your team very, very well. My team was able to hold off, and because of that, as you can see, the vehicle like the IS-4 here, as soon as he shot and he saw me starting to unload on him, well, there's one shell into the IS-4, and of course I'm going to get one more, and that's about 750, almost 800 hit points taken off of him there. That's deadly. You know, that's game-changing, being able to hit those shells. But I was starting to think of why these tanks just get such a low average win rate, and I started to play them, and it really makes sense. So currently, the T110E3 is the reigning champion of win rate for your tier 10 tank destroyers in Blitz, and it kind of follows suit for your tier 9 average. You know, it's more of the armored frontline tank destroyers that have higher win rates compared to a vehicle, let's say, like the Waffle. Even though the Waffle is such a strong vehicle, it still struggles if your team is going to lose. And the reason for that being is because, first of all, this tank here and the Grill 15, the 183, don't have very good camouflage. So when you're running a vehicle like this, you have to be extremely careful not to get detected when you're shooting. Second of all, you can't run frontline. A vehicle like, let's say, the Badger, even though I'm not a huge fan of the Badger, it falls apart very quickly, it can still do frontline capabilities that a vehicle like the 4005 just can't. And another good example is the T110E3. I can literally run a T110E3 frontline. I can sit there confidently bouncing tier 10 shells, trading shots with enemy opponents, and not even worry about losing hit points. Even if I do get hit, it's usually high explosive shells, and heat shells, of course, are going to be doing less on average damage. I can trade shells, 640 alpha. Well, how are you going to do that in a grill? You, of course, can't do that in a grill 15 because it literally cannot support its team. And when you're running a vehicle like an FE 4005, and a perfect example of this was on Oasis Palms, I was able to do a crazy amount of damage this game. I was able to try and carry my team as hard as I humanly could. And we'll skip in a little bit here so you can see what I started to do. But pretty much, in a 4005, you can't really push aggressive. Now, of course, eating my own words, the enemy 4005 did push very, very aggressive, and I think it actually got away quite well with it right until the end of the game. But the thing is that you can't really push aggressive in a vehicle like a Grill or 4005. You're going to be spotted and you're going to be shot at. And what that means is you have to stay at the back of the map. And then you're relying on your team to get spotting for you. Right now, you can see I have to reposition. And by the way, I will say this E100 was the entire reason we lost this game, which is kind of sad. You'll see that later on. But pretty much that's a perfect example of what the issue with these vehicles are, is if you have a player like the E100 that completely ignores its teammates, pushes to the other side of the map, well, you'll notice that I'm pushing over here, I'm trying to support my team, and this is what you want to do in a 4005. But if you can't get your shells out, and if you can't support your team enough, you can see my team is bleeding. They're falling apart very, very quickly. And if I was in a vehicle like, let's say, a T110E3 or a Badger, well, I could have been in the front line, supporting my team, holding there. And that's really the big difference between what makes the glass cannon such a bad tank at winning games. You can average really good damage, as I said. I'm averaging 4,300 in the tank today, and these 3 shots here, they felt so good. Loading that premium shell there, you can see I brought what was a very healthy Chieftain Mark 6 down to shrivels of his former self. But the thing is that my team wouldn't have had to fall back here. My teammate wouldn't have died. And I could have been holding frontline in a vehicle like a T110E3 where I have to sit here and try and support my team to the best of my abilities. And again, my team just falls apart so quickly. Now again, the 4005, it's such a weird vehicle because I wish the gun was a little bit more accurate. If the gun was more accurate, this game here could have been extremely different. And you have to rely on RNG running a vehicle like this, of course, to save your team. The C100, I don't think has done any damage yet. And with that, you can see it's already 2 tanks down on our team. And while the enemy team has lost 3, you'll see that it starts to change tides very quickly. There you go. Now it is another 3-3 battle. And yeah, there's, again, nothing I can do. Of course, I can't push aggressive, especially against smart players running vehicles. They've got a hated player and as well a straight player, one of them being in that 4005. I, of course, don't want to push extremely aggressive on tanks that will rip me apart if I do push out in the open. Again, E3, I probably could have helped out my teammates here, and they wouldn't have fallen apart. But because I can't really reposition to get any shells out, I'm sitting currently just as much as I can. Now, thankfully, that first shell zoomed right into the Super Conqueror. I'm going to load premium. There is me getting detected, but I wanted to finish off the Super Conk, and there you go, 3 shells into him, finishing him off. So we're sitting at 3,600 damage this game so far, and I have worked my butt off to help out my team. I've tried to connect all of my shells. A couple of them have missed, but again, my teammates just keep falling apart. And there's nothing I could have done to push aggressive where, again, an E3, a Badger, or what other armored tank destroyers can you think of? Honestly, well, I was going to say T95, but really, no, a T95 couldn't have done that. But yeah, as soon as I shoot this T22, not much I could have done there. And by then I'm like, well, shoot, it's me and Deputy Doofy over here. And I knew that this E100 hasn't done anything the entire game. If this E100 had just literally gone to the heavy side, we are not heavy, but medium side, we would have won the game. If he had just literally lost those 2,500 hit points, just dying and doing 0 damage, he probably would have given our team enough slack and enough time and enough effort for me to farm that we probably could have won this game. But the thing is that a glass cannon relies on its teammates. And with the current meta of Blitz, do you really want to rely on your teammates to win battles? And that is why a vehicle like the Grill and the 4005 have such a low average win rate, is because of players like this in the E100 that don't really pay attention to your team. They don't know where to push. And granted, you did get that shell out, but by then, there was nothing I could have done to win this game. And pretty much our E100 fell apart extremely quickly, getting, pretty quickly enveloped by shells. So, as you can see, I did 4,500 damage, top on the team by far. And that E100, that only shell he fired on the 4005 was the only damage he dealt the entire game. 41%. And, of course, it's not anything against the player, but the issue is that you can't a custom against players like this. You can't pull out a vehicle like a 4005, and if you have one of those players on your team, you pretty much have a defeat if you're running a tank like a 4005, because you can't support your teammates when you've got a player like that. The enemy team, of course, did a decent job. They pushed correctly. They knew what to do, and because of that, the 4005 on their team, great job to the 4005. They're able to support, but it just shows you that vehicles that are glass cannon struggle so much in Blitz, and it's a reason that I never make videos on these vehicles and tell people to go down the line, because they're just so weak in the current meta. Light tanks, medium tanks, and the mobile heavies that are currently being spammed rip these things apart, and especially with the worse and worse players entering the game, it's sad that you can't carry a team if you're a skilled player in a vehicle like the 4005, the Grill, or even go down tiers. You got vehicles like the Sturder or Mill. You look at, I guess even like the 263 kind of accounts as a glass cannon. They're just so weak that you rely on your team to get spots for you, and you can't do anything unless they are your team, which... yeah, there's no I in team, but sometimes, like that last game of the 4005, I had to play personally stronger than the whole team, and we still couldn't win. So this is something that's always been bugging me, and an issue that you can't really fix in the game, because you can't change how the way glass cannons are played. You can't buff their armor. That would make them ridiculous. So I love the way these tanks play, but because of the current meta of Blitz and the players we have on our teams, I just find it unfun, and almost I've got like this sense of insecurity when I'm running a vehicle like this, that I have to rely on my team to win the games. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. But for me personally, it's something that I've always had an issue with, and something that I've come to terms with lately that shows that you really can't win in a lightly armored tank if your team is bad, where if you're running a vehicle like the E3, you could get a much higher average win rate. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. But other than that, hopefully all of you enjoyed today's video. If you agree with me, please consider smashing that subscribe button down below. But other than that, we'll be seeing you in the next one.